Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador led the celebrations of the 211th anniversary of Mexico's independence this Thursday. The 9th summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization opened in Tajikistan this Thursday as Central Asian allies discussed the unfolding crisis in Afghanistan. The first trucks carrying Iranian fuel oil crossed the Syrian border into Lebanon on Thursday to help ease the energy crisis. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Mexico, where President Andrés Manuel López Obrador led the celebrations to commemorate the 211th anniversary of the country's independence. The main ceremony was held from the National Palace, where the head of state gave a speech honouring freedom, justice, sovereignty and the heroic people of Mexico. López Obrador also held a minute's silence in memory of the victims of COVID-19. This is the second year in a row that, due to the ongoing pandemic, the celebrations have been held without the attendance of the general public. President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, is the guest of honour at Thursday's Independence Day celebrations and became the first foreign leader to address the event. And Mexico held a military parade in honour of the anniversary of independence this Thursday. The annual tradition dates back to the 19th century and is held yearly in the massive main square known as the Zócalo in Mexico City, representing one of the biggest events of the year. The independence celebrations come ahead of a summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States on Saturday, which will see regional leaders address the response to the pandemic and the establishment of funds to deal with disasters caused by climate change, among other pressing issues. It will also see Mexico outline the call to create a new body to replace the infamous Organization of American States, denounced for its interference in the internal affairs of several member states. And Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel stated on Twitter that it was an honor to be in Mexico on the day of the so-called Cry of Dolores, the national holiday of the country. The Cuban leader also ratified Cuba's love and respect for the Mexican people and their government as they celebrate their independence. President of Bolivia, Luis Arce, also congratulated his Mexican counterpart on the 211th anniversary of the country's independence. Arce wished peace and prosperity for the courageous nation of Mexico and stressed that Bolivia is grateful for its government's support for democracy. And as part of his speech to mark Mexico's Independence Day, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador highlighted support for Cuba in the face of continued attacks by the U.S. government.
That President Joe Biden, who is politically sensitive enough, will act with such greatness and put an end to the policy of grievances towards Cuba for good. We might or might not agree with the Cuban Revolution and its government, but to have resisted 62 years without subjugation is an undisputable historical feat.
And Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel also emphasized the significance of Mexico's support in the face of U.S. attacks, which have caused immense harm to the Cuban population.
The decision to invite us has immeasurably greater value at a time when we are suffering the onslaught of a multi-dimensional war, with the criminal blockade opportunistically intensified by more than 240 measures in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has such dramatic costs for all, but in particular for the least developed countries.
In Bolivia, over 70 social and youth organizations and urban collectives created a coordinating committee in defense of the process of change led by the government of President Luis Arce. The activists called for the unity of all Bolivians and organizations that share the ideal of social justice in order to confront the destabilizing maneuvers promoted by some media outlets and right-wing sectors. They also urged the authorities to continue the investigations to identify those responsible for killings, detentions and persecution during the regime imposed by Janine Áñez and ensure justice for all victims.
Today's political context is not easy. The coup, fascist and separatist intentions continue and are promoted and financed by some media, by some mayors and governors, by the leadership of the Catholic Church, by alleged human rights defenders, by agro-industrial entrepreneurs, by landowners and other nefarious characters. This time, no coup attack will find us neither disorganized nor demobilized.
Britain's Trade Union Congress, which represents over 5.5 million workers in the United Kingdom, has called on the British government to stop its support of human rights abuses in Colombia. Currently holding its annual Congress, the TUC unanimously passed a motion in support of Colombian trade unionists, protesters and activists, which called on the British government to review security and trade partnerships with Colombia in response to the ongoing and widespread human rights abuses in the country. The motion highlights the horrific abuses against protesters committed by security forces under Colombian President Ivan Duque during the trade union-led national strike protests that mobilized millions of people. It also notes that Colombian government ministers made dangerous and unfounded insinuations linking protesters to criminal organisations and legitimising police violence against them. British trade unionists also call attention to the ongoing killings of their colleagues in Colombia, which remains the most dangerous country in the world for trade unionists. The Bahamas holds general elections this Thursday to elect the 38 members of the House of Assembly. Over 194,000 people were registered to cast their ballots. Current Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis said he expects at least a 90% voter turnout. The vote takes place with strict measures due to the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak. Minnis called the early election in August, which was not constitutionally due until May 2022. The two main contenders are Minnis's Free National Movement and the Progressive Liberal Party led by Philip Davis. Polls have the two neck and neck in what's likely to be the tightest election in years. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The 9th summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization opened in the capital of Tajikistan on Thursday. The summit brought together the heads of government of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia and Tajikistan. Addressing the event, the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, warned that the social and economic situation in Afghanistan could lead to a humanitarian crisis. The meeting was held amidst the uncertainty surrounding the future of Afghanistan, with the return to power of the Taliban after 2 decades of Western military intervention and the wider consequences for the Central Asian region. Russian President Vladimir Putin was the only head of state participating via video conference due to close contact with a COVID-19 case.
The situation in the area of the CSTO's responsibility and at the state members' borders is not just unstable, but it also bears new truly critical challenges and threatens the security of our countries.
President Putin also stated that the Collective Security Treaty Organization must use all its potential to ensure peace in the region.
In the present conditions, close coordination and unanimity of CSTO states is much needed as never. We have also agreed that it's necessary to be ready at any moment to use to the full extent the CSTO's defense and political potential to ensure security, maintain peace and stability in our countries.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry highlighted the irresponsibility of the deal on nuclear submarines between Australia, Britain and the United States, stressing it threatened the geopolitical stability of the Asian region.
The export of highly sensitive nuclear submarine technology by the United States and Britain to Australia once again proves that they use nuclear exports as a tool of geopolitical games and adopt double standards, which is extremely irresponsible.
The European Parliament approved a report recommending a tougher EU policy towards Russia in the latest escalation of attacks. During a Thursday session, 494 members of the EU Parliament voted in favour of the document, calling on the bloc to tighten its sanctions on Russia, reinforce defensive capabilities to contain the supposed threat posed, and ensure Europe's energy security by reducing the bloc's reliance on Russian resources. European deputies also called on the bloc not to recognise the results of the upcoming elections in Russia. In the meantime, Russian Foreign Minister spokeswoman Maria Zakharova stressed the relations between Moscow and the EU will be seriously harmed if the European Parliament finally decides not to acknowledge the results of the parliamentary elections. China has fully vaccinated over 1 billion people against COVID-19, taking the lead over the US and Europe, despite its huge population, and showing that strong state policy can secure results. Mi Feng, a spokesperson at the National Health Commission, said on Thursday that the country had inoculated over 70% of its population. The milestone comes nearly 10 months after China gave the green light to the vaccine produced by the state-owned national pharmaceutical group Sinopharm and kicked off its immunisation campaign. Another 6 shots have since been developed by domestic drug makers and have been cleared and rolled out to those aged 12 and older, while the vaccination of children from the age of 3 upwards has also begun. In France, at least 3,000 unvaccinated health workers were suspended on the first day that the law requiring vaccination of sector employees came into force. The French health minister explained that the suspensions are temporary and that most of those suspended are not doctors, but support staff such as laundry workers or those from other services. Along with these 3,000 suspensions, there were also dozens of resignations on the first day of obligation. The mandatory vaccination established by an emergency law adopted in early August stipulates that as of September 15th, the groups concerned must prove that they have received at least a first dose and be fully vaccinated by October 15th. Chile will reopen its borders to all vaccinated foreigners as of October 1st. Deputy Tourism Minister José Luis Uriarte announced the move on Thursday, explaining that all non-resident travellers attempting to enter the country must validate their vaccine information on the government website prior to travelling. In addition, all foreign travellers must provide a negative COVID-19 test taken no less than 72 hours prior to entering the country, as well as proof of being covered by at least a $30,000 medical insurance policy in the event of infection. The government hopes that these measures will reactivate the tourism sector for the coming summer months. Foreign travellers coming into Chile account for 40% of the industry's income, according to local travel authorities. After the slow and chaotic acquisition of COVID-19 vaccines in Brazil, including alleged fraud involving the country's far-right president Jair Bolsonaro, the nation is gradually advancing with the vaccination of its citizens. Around 36% of the population is now fully immunised, a figure still much lower than that of many other countries, and particularly alarming given the major health crisis the country has suffered, reporting the second highest COVID-19 death toll in the world. For now, 4 vaccines are being administered. The 2 most used are AstraZeneca and CoronaVac, which are being produced in Brazil, followed by the Pfizer and Janssen shots.
I think that it took too long. I believe that Brazil could have brought this forward due to the number of deaths. It would have saved many lives. Now, thanks God, we have already vaccinated 60% of the population with the first dose and we are moving forward with the second dose. The cases and deaths are decreasing. This means that the vaccine really works for those who still have doubts.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The first trucks carrying Iranian fuel oil crossed the Syrian border into Lebanon to help ease the energy crisis in the midst of the collapsed economy. A convoy of around 20 tanker trucks carrying Iranian fuel oil arrived at the Baninas port in Syria on Sunday and were immediately unloaded. The Syrian government mobilized dozens of tanker trucks to transport the diesel to the eastern Lebanese town of Baalbek by Thursday. 3 other tankers carrying diesel and 1 carrying gasoline will arrive in the coming weeks. Diesel will be donated for a period of 1 month to institutions including public hospitals, nursing homes, orphanages, water stations and the Lebanese Red Cross. Others that will get fuel at low prices are private hospitals, medicine and serum factories, bakeries and cooperatives that sell food products. Also in Lebanon, Tarek Bitta, the judge heading the investigation into last year's explosion in Beirut port, issued an arrest warrant for former Public Works Minister Yusuf Finyanos on Thursday. The order was issued in his absence in the courtroom. At least 280 people were killed and more than 6,000 injured after 2,750 tons of improperly stored ammonium nitrate exploded at Beirut port on August 4th, 2020. The United States, Australia and the United Kingdom announced the formation of a trilateral alliance in an effort to balance what they refer to as the rising influence of China in the Indo-Pacific region. US President Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, agreed to exchange military technology, nuclear-powered submarines and other warfare equipment. In a virtual meeting with his counterparts, Biden claimed that the Allies' naval positioning in the Pacific seeks to ensure peace in the region. The move is the latest in the escalation of provocative acts by Western powers in their ongoing attacks on China.
And the first task of this partnership will be
Canadians are preparing to head to the polls next Monday, September 20th, in a snap election called by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Our correspondent Pablo Vivanco brings us more information in the following report.
For the second time in less than 2 years, Canadians will go to the polls to elect a new government this September the 20th. Despite widespread opposition to the vote, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called on the election with the hopes of achieving a majority government after falling short of a majority of seats in Canada's parliament in the 2019 elections. Trudeau's Liberals have promised bold actions on a number of issues including climate change and economic recovery, but this may not be enough to swing more voters, according to recent polls. The Liberals are in a very tight race with the resurgent Conservative Party under new leader Erin O'Toole, who hopes to bring the right-wing party back to power, campaigning on reviving the economy and especially businesses that have closed as a result of the pandemic measures. O'Toole has also been looking to capitalize on anger towards Trudeau and the Liberals over a number of scandals before and during the pandemic, as well as frustration over the pandemic. The centre-left New Democrats under Jagmeet Singh are looking to gain some seats, particularly in the country's urban and industrial centres, campaigning on taxes on the wealthy and to fund an expansion of social programs including pharmacare and dental care. Singh NDP is currently polling at around 16%. In Quebec, the regional party, the Bloc Québécois, are likely to retain their hold over those seats, while the Green Party under new leader Unami Paul could lose the 2 seats they have currently. This election has also seen the rise in the polls of the right populist People's Party under former Conservative Minister Maxime Bernier, despite their exclusion from all debates, galvanizing those who oppose measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, including lockdowns and vaccine passports. Concerns over climate change continue to top the concerns of the minds of voters after wildfires ripped through the provinces of British Columbia and Ontario, though the capacity of the healthcare system and mandatory vaccinations are also of concern, according to polls. The elections also come after a summer where the remains of thousands of indigenous children in residential schools were uncovered, prompting nationwide protests. These elections could also be pivotal for Trudeau, as well as the leaders of the NDP and the Greens, all of who could face the prospect of having to step down if their parties do not improve their results from the last elections.
Chile commemorates this Thursday the 48th anniversary of the assassination of Victor Jara, one of the country's most emblematic voices. Victor Jara was arrested shortly after the coup of September 11, 1973, which overthrew President Salvador Allende. He was tortured during interrogations and ultimately shot dead by the repressive forces of the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship on September 16th. His body was thrown out on the street of a shantytown in the capital, Santiago. Victor Jara remains one of the leading figures of what became known as the protest songs genre in Latin America. His verses and his voice continue to be a call to the oppressed peoples of the world. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.